Ladies and gentlemen, we are live with Ben Joseph Stewart, the creator you may know about. We've been talking about him on the channel of Kymatica and Esoteric Agenda and many other independent films. He is a filmmaker, a content creator. He's generally a Renaissance man, and we're going to dive deep into what got him into this. And welcome to the show.
Yeah, man, it's such a pleasure. I was just telling you beforehand, so the audience knows. Just recently, I reported on the coronal hole 86, was it, or something like that? Because I
87.
found it 87, because I found it on your page and started deep diving on your content, man. You're doing a great job. So thank you for, I think it's serendipitous that you reach out around the same time.
Yeah, that
So,
always works that way.
yeah.
I'll be
So
talking about a famous person or somebody in the news, and then somehow I'll get their email. And as soon as I email them, in 5 seconds, they email me back. They were like waiting for my email.
amazing.
Yeah. And so that's how I came into contact with you first, probably in 2010. And this is when I found Kymatica, and then I, did some research, and then I found Esoteric Agenda. Most of the people that are listening, I would say 50% of the people that are going to listen to this have seen those. So explain to the people like you did for me, like what got you into that. And that was literally the beginning of your filmmaking career, correct?
It was, yeah. So at that time, I had just gotten out of the military. I was in from age 17 to 23. And in that time, so it was around, I got out 2006, and my band started in 2002. We were on Lollapalooza by 2003. It was really just music that I was into. And I wouldn't even say that I did film as a side hustle. I really was only interested in music and moving people through the arts. But I saw this film called Zeitgeist, which I'm sure everyone here has heard of, and I saw it. Also, I had taken, honestly, the stories got conflated. Now I can barely remember whether it was LSD or it was mushrooms, but I took something and then I watched Zeitgeist. And the thing that particularly stuck out to me was that Peter Joseph, he narrated it, he edited it, he did all the soundtrack, at least most, I would think, of the soundtrack material for it. And he put it up online for free. It was a lot of time he put into it. And then he also didn't plaster his name all over it. He didn't have, hey, go to my website. And it wasn't a marketing ploy. And it came across that way. It really did feel like, hey, listen, I just want you to wake up. You don't even have to know my name. Just pass this movie along. And I thought that was a really bold move. And so I instantly, I was like, I have to do the very same thing. So I'd never made any film. I'd never video edited at all. And 6 months later, I had already gotten my computer, and Esoteric Agenda was just about done. And that was when I really started diving into the research as well. So it wasn't like I was researching for 12 years beforehand. So just to finish on that, I'm an artist first and foremost. Research is now something that I'm a very avid reader and a researcher, but that really comes from the initial impulse to move people through art. And audiovisual art is really just the evolution of where I was at with music at the time.
So you said your band was on tour with Lollapalooza?
Yeah, so we only did one date on Lollapalooza. It was up in Washington, but it was with Audioslave, A Perfect Circle, Incubus.
Oh, wow.
Who else was it? Jurassic 5, Jane's Addiction, obviously, 30 Seconds to Mars, Kings of Leon. I go on and on.
It
A lot of
sounds like
amazing
a
bands.
great show.
And then we also, we stuck with it. We all the way up to the very end of our career, we were still playing with Jane's Addiction, Three Doors Down, the Used, nonstop bigger bands, Filter, Fuel, constantly touring. But we weren't really cutting it, because at this time, all the streaming services, they had annihilated CD sales. And at the same time, when I started making films, DVD sales nosedived at the same time. So I wasn't really there making money at all. I was really kind of poor at this time. But at the time, I was still single, didn't have any kids. So I was able to kind of live out of a car and live off of $20,000, $30,000 a year. And inflation hadn't hit so hard either back then.
Yeah,
But
everything.
yeah, the music was really what helped me become a different kind of filmmaker. And I say that because I instantly knew that, if you were to have made Zeitgeist with much shittier editing, crappy soundtrack, or how some films it's just like super epic, almost like um
Too much.
Star Wars kinds of soundtracks, and the soundtrack is way too loud and you can barely hear what's being said, or it just doesn't fit the moment. I really knew that, like, this is like making a music video. You got to hit people with what they're hearing, which is their subconscious, and what they're seeing, which is informational. And then the story, the narration, which isn't just supposed to be educational. I believe it's supposed to be poetic, which is the perfect merger between education and timeless philosophical tropes and, things along those lines. So Zeitgeist was the one that really taught me this is an art form. This isn't just a way of getting your information or your worldview from your head into somebody else's head. So that was my favorite part of it, was really treating it more like an art form.
And an art form indeed. You did Esoteric Agenda. Here's the IMDb. Gets a good rating, 7.7 out of 10. How about that?
Not
And
bad.
and Kymatica is over here at 7.5. Can we find this over at your website, Ben Joseph Stewart?
Yeah, you can find those films on my website. And you
Okay.
can also find all my exclusive content, which I do about 30 minutes a week, like one drop, a video, a deeper dive that I really can't get into on YouTube. But as you see in the upper hand corner, you can click on that link up there and get to my YouTube page. And by going to my website, that's how you can find all the rest of the social media stuff. I'm not trying to become some big influencer. I'm not out there super marketing myself or, showing all the things people could like dump money into. I'm really just trying to reach people where they're at so they can understand a little bit deeper some of the topics that I get into. And it's fascinating. Right now, I'm super into like Alison McDowell's work and Sabrina Wallace and Whitney Webb, who are really diving deep on this techno feudalist future that we're facing.
Oh my goodness, that's a whole different podcast.
Right.
The crazy transhumanist movement and where we're headed so exponentially. Do you know about the term singularity and what that's supposed to mean?
Yeah, I mean, there's the Kurzweil definition. There have been some other kinds of definitions. All these definitions eventually turn colloquial and start to, I wouldn't say lose their meaning, but as they get used socially, it just kind of becomes this like apocalypse. Like we're in the apocalypse, or we're in World War III right now, and some people have different definitions of what it means, where it starts, how it ends. But singularity is, at least in the Kurzweil sense, is a lot more about when technology finally gets away from us to where we're not the ones building it anymore. It is self-assembling, and where it is also on an exponential curve to where within minutes it can go from being, let's say, and this is their words, it can go from being as intelligent and productive as humans, even if it's a different kind of intelligence, as intelligent and productive as humans, and then within minutes it can be twice that much.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly, the more that I've gotten into this, I won't dive into all the different paradigms that have been crumbling for me, as far as like virology and news media and what's happening in the world. But the deeper I look into these subjects, the more I realize I'm fascinated by it, but I am no expert, and I'm also losing a lot of faith in most people who call themselves experts in these things. I have the Socratic view of it, where it's like if you believe everything and nothing at the same time, you're most optimally positioned to not be wrong and to have the ability to, humble yourself to know, like, okay, what I'm seeing, it feels cohesive, but it's probably my worldview is not complete. So I understand that the model I have of reality is not complete, and therefore it does have holes in it. And so just stay open to that, but use your intuition to navigate yourself to where it's going. But back to the singularity part of it, the reason why I say that here is because I don't really, I feel like a lot of the things that I've been studying lately, like gene therapies and nucleic acid therapies, and, in a sense, getting the human body to become a part of the telecommunications infrastructure with all the 5G masts and stuff that has gone up since 2020. I really don't know what of this tech is real and what of it is just smoke and mirrors, because there are some groups like Ginkgo Bioworks and National Resilience who helped with Moderna's thing, and there's a lot of hype around it. And that hype itself can make a stock skyrocket, and it doesn't mean that there's anything there. It just means that the hype helped boost the stock. So when it comes to the singularity, I really don't know how close we are. I don't know how much we have to worry, but I do know that we should worry about here's my phone. This is a $3 trillion super weapon, and it's in most people's hands. The Obama phone, people are like, oh my God, he's giving it freely to poor people. And I'm like, yeah, to harvest their data and to
Yeah.
make sure that surveillance happens from the top of the economic ladder to the bottom. Before you start applauding for Obama there, understand that if you don't have to pay for the product, then you're the product. You're being harvested. So I do think we should take a look at what technocracy looks like in the coming decade, because our world is about to change dramatically from having people are like, oh, I'm starting to hear more about smart cities and 15-minute cities. And like, yeah. So have you looked into cognitive cities or C40 cities? It's the next evolution of smart cities. And most people are like, oh, I'm not done researching what a smart city is to begin with. And well, that means the city is a device. And then you are also being turned into a device. And on top of that, it doesn't matter whether it's decentralized or centralized. Every city, every smart city is its own petri dish, and they can have their own little false flags. And this is how you segregate information from one city to the next.
It's interesting how you put it, that you're the product. Like, I realized that 10 years ago. I think I walked into a Walmart and I'm like in the center aisle in the back where the electronics are. I'm looking at these huge TVs, $100. How is that possible? And then I looked into what a Roku was. I'm like, these are spy devices. They're, even when you turn them, once you turn them on in your home, even when you turn them off, they're on.
Mm-hmm.
They have
Unless you unplug
capacitors
them.
inside. Maybe for a few hours, the capacitors continue to run and listen.
Wow.
And it's all wireless. So if you have a router, it could be sending signals out to the router.
And the routers themselves, using machine learning, have learned the ability to be able to create a 3D rendering
I've seen
of
that.
people in their houses through walls and in complete darkness. And, name one person that maybe you do, but name one person that that doesn't have a router in their house.
Right.
So, I mean, when you're talking about the surveillance state, people are like, yeah, but that's futuristic. I'm like, no, it's 10 years ago.
Yep.
Like, it's already here. It's just under a different guise. Like everything that I've been learning, I'll tangent once. In the 70s to the 80s, they changed the definition of what a retrovirus was in order to then classify what Luc Montagnier found as HIV as being one of those things. And the more that I look into Alex Zeck's work, and, I don't know how I fully feel about it, but when they really take a look at what is the foundation of virology, it's not like they isolate something and they can see it in a sick person and then they study it. What they do is they take the snot of a sick person, then they add rhesus monkeys' kidney cells to it. Then they add, I forget the exact kind of antibiotic that is damaging to kidney cells specifically. Then they take fetal bovine serum, they add that to it. And the way they extract fetal bovine serum sounds like a dark magic ritual. And they add all that stuff to it before they put it under a microscope and actually start analyzing how do we isolate where the virus is. So to me, some of these paradigms are coming apart where I'm not hopping from one model to another model, but I'm like, there are so many unanswered questions and so much smoke and mirrors right now that we really don't know what the last 3 years of COVID was really all about. The more I look into it, the more I'm like, okay, I'm learning more about PCR tests. What would there have been if there was an agenda? Because Kerry Mullis, the inventor of the PCR test, who had his own issues, also said, this isn't how you test for a virus. And then everyone else, a bunch of other people, like, yeah, you're right. This is not how you test for a virus, but it is if you wanted to take a single strand of some kind of genetics or genomic sequence, how you would replicate it very quickly. So you're telling me that PCR is more a way how you harvest genetic codes from people. And then it started coming out that Boston Labs, maybe not Boston Labs, Boston University started a database for all the PCR tests. For what? So they could take your genetics and catalog them. And then you start taking a look at the universal barcode of life and all the genomics companies like Ginkgo Bioworks. And there's Chinese companies that are like, our vision is to basically genetically gather the genetic codes of every living thing in the world, put a barcode to it, and then have it monitored through this thing called the sentient world simulation, which has your digital twins, which is like an avatar of you, but 2 or 3 of them using all your billions of data points, so they can run you through a simulation. So Goldman Sachs and some of these other major investment companies can bet on your children to see how successful they will be. And also, if they're not successful enough by age 5, or I'm sorry, like grade 5 or something like that, what do? Well, sorry, Tammy is not going to be able to make it into these universities. So we're not even going to open up the possibility that maybe she'll turn it around. So we're going to take off the table the ability that she can go to this university. And that's when Goldman Sachs comes in. Okay, well, then I'm going to take some money off of Tammy and I'm going to put it on Joe over here. So betting on the children is also impacting the way that their futures are going to be. So the entire landscape, from education, from the cradle all the way to not just grave, but from education all the way into the workforce, all these things are changing, and it's becoming a game that your social media reputation is going to be connected to your digital ID, which is going to allow you on certain websites. Also, transacting, you may not be able to buy certain things if you said the wrong thing on social media.
Yeah.
So, man, I went into a bunch of different areas there, but like, this is techno feudalism, and it's already here.
Absolutely. And the big shift occurred. I don't know if you're aware of the Smith Modernization Act of 2012.
Yes,
Yeah. So that
that was
began
Obama. Yeah.
the uh, the legal use of propaganda in the news and media for whatever nefarious purpose they want. So literally, and then that you get all those clips of this is bad for our democracy, where thousands of talking head puppets are all saying the exact same thing that was sent out on the teleprompter by the shadow government, the boogeyman, the Illuminati. Whoever is controlling this globalist agenda literally has cherry picked the most corrupt and evil people for each position. I'm talking like WHO, the WEF, and on the central banks.
Yep. And they're all in one spot right now.
Davos.
Yep.
Yep. And so what's interesting is my partner and I have been discussing this ad nauseum, and it appears as if what's going to happen is we're going to break apart into 2 races on Earth. The people that refuse digital anything, CBDCs, the card, whatever they want us to do, and then the other people. And they'll call us the dirty ones or the infected, while all the other vaccinated people in the smart cities are, getting their free rations and their money to their barcodes on their wrists. We're literally going to be the resistance in the woods that aren't doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's true. And, what seems to be brilliant about it is the narrative spinning, because the propagandizing of it, even people who are very weary of the fact that mainstream media is the very force that's dividing us, they're telling us, who should you be afraid of, so you know who to vote for, so you can continually have neocons and warhawks in office. Like, as soon as they started saying Nikki Haley,
Oh dear.
is who we're going to champion, you just take a look at Nikki Haley, and yes to any war, yes to anything that pops up, and she's stepped into her ultra masculine. And I am, I've never voted. I'm not going to vote this time around. There's an energetic thing about it. I don't discourage people from voting. I encourage people who go to any of those kinds of lengths to do so consciously. Bring your awareness to it, and vote from a certain space within that isn't just intellectualized, but I feel like me going out and voting for this person for this reason is the way to go about it. And I do believe that is the only way that your vote really has force and effect, is if it connects with the field. And I won't go super woo, right now, but to me, the more you really understand about what the field truly is. And there's this great book by Paul Levy called Undreaming Watiko. It's a fantastic book. And Watiko is just, it's not the shadow, but it operates in everyone's shadow, even in the people who are like trying to be the resistance. It operates within us as well and illuminates our blind spots. And so I say this because Watiko is in the field and also is an aspect of whatever higher divinity there may be, there specifically to show you that real spirituality is not about like just doing the things like, oh, I meditate this many hours. Yes, but do you really bring awareness to it? Oh, I vote. Yes, but do you bring awareness to it? Oh, I love my kids. Yes, but do you bring awareness to them? And to me, this is all signaling to the field. And I think the trap that we've gotten ourselves into is this idea that anyone who doubts the official story, whatever that may be, can now be claimed to be a terrorist. Because remember when I was saying, like, in the 70s they changed the definition of a retrovirus. It is 2021, I think, when they changed the definition of a vaccine. They change definitions all the time in order to, let's say it was after the housing crash in 2008. They're like, oh, well, we need help from BlackRock and all these major investment firms. So we're going to let them buy up affordable housing to help our economy bounce back. Now we find ourselves where BlackRock and, Vanguard and State Street, they own almost 60% of all affordable housing. So if you want to go out and buy a house as a millennial, not only is it far more expensive, but only 40% of the real estate market is still available for you to get a home. So we're stepping into this you will own nothing and be
Yes.
happy
Yeah,
about it
we are
fast.
we are a train wreck headed right into the pile. It's people don't realize. I think that this is I mean, the words have been out there for decades, right? Agenda 2030,
Mhm.
Agenda 2035. What they're doing is they're bankrupting the first world is being bankrupt by the globalists. They're going to price everyone out of everything. And if you're starving and you can't afford anything anymore, the likelihood of you accepting CBDCs, these smart cities, and you moving in to get your annual income and your rations is much higher. It's rolling out in plain sight right now before your very lives. It takes years. It's not going to be like tomorrow. They're like, money's canceled and you've got to do all this, because no one would go for that. They're going to
Right.
put all of humanity in a position where they have to accept it or they starve.
So have you heard about some of the possible false flags this year?
No, but let's dive into it. I mean, alien invasion. All this alien stuff.
Yeah. So I mean, that's part of the just candy, the low hanging fruit for those who don't realize that most of the stuff on the news is to distract you from deeper news that they're not talking about. Um, this is also why the left, says they hate Trump so bad, but they won't stop talking about him, because the left and the right understand that most of these candidates, if you hear their name, they're part of a red herring, whether they know it or not. So I'm not trashing every candidate out there, but I'm saying that even the candidates who think they're fighting the good fight, they're still stepping into the archetype of a red herring. So the red flags that are the false flags that I'm talking about, Whitney Webb has recently been sharing. So Michael Schellenberger talked about the CTIL, this cyber threat intelligence league, and they owe no allegiance to any country, and a lot of it comes from Israeli intelligence, and much of our this is what Whitney Webb unearthed back in 2021. And Schellenberger got all this news, and I'm not putting him down, but he got all this news for saying, like, look, they're the censorship industrial complex. And Whitney Webb had to go on redacted and be like, yeah, how could Michael Schellenberger find that out and not realize that that's their side hustle? The real thing they have going on since 2021, because they're recent, is access to critical infrastructure, hospitals, waterways, dams, nuclear power plants. So you have a foreign company or an international company owing no allegiance to anywhere, but they started as we will do this pro bono for the United States, meaning we will take care of the cybersecurity for your critical infrastructure in the United States at no charge. Don't worry about it. And these are people, Ohad Zaidenberg and other people that are involved in the CTIL that have access, like backdoor access into critical infrastructure. Whitney Webb is like, how could this not mean that all there has to be is a false flag that, let's say, like the Colonial Pipeline thing that happened here 2 years ago, where a cyber attack shut down. I'm in Tennessee. So we didn't have any gas all the way down to Florida for a week. There was no gas. And that was because of a cyber attack, something that wouldn't have happened decades before. So now think more than gas, think waterways, dams. You could dry up a village. You could flood a village. I was watching this film with Kevin Hart on Netflix last night called Lift. And they touch upon this very topic of cyber groups, cyber hackers, and basically flooding villages and, potentially causing for nuclear meltdowns in plants and stuff like that. All there would need to be is one big event right before the elections or close to the elections for you to use the War Powers Act potentially and say, we can't have an election for your safety. We can't do any kind of power change. So would they go to that length? I mean, it seems like if Trump seems like he's going to be getting into office, I would imagine a false flag would be one of the best ways to keep him out. And I don't even think him getting into office would truly change anything, to be perfectly honest. I do sense that they don't want him in office. But beyond the specific characters, I look beneath that to say, who are the people who you don't vote in? Who are the people who you barely even know whether they have real control or not? This would be the CTIL. This would be the Davos group. This would be when Klaus is talking about penetrating cabinets. They're penetrated by people who already have enough dirt on them that could be exploited. So they will do the dirty work of their higher ups. So I think the false flag, you are going to get a cyber attack this year. It's going to be blamed on Bitcoin. It's going to be blamed on either Iran or Russia or China. Because if you have access to the back end, all you have to do is say, like, okay, CTIL, tell us who did this. Well, every single cyber attack in the past, they're like, well, it was China. And then you go into the article and you're like, how do we know it was China? Medium to low probability that we know it was China because they use the same tactics as we've seen the Chinese use before. And then you say, okay, well, who gave you this information? Oh, it's our private, source. We can't name them. So somebody that you can't tell us who it is with medium to low probability that it could be this country, and you want everyone to believe that it's this country and it actually didn't happen from within the country. It is the bankrupting of this country. Catherine Austin Fitts said it in the 90s, who worked under George H.W. Bush, said that she was getting people in the 90s telling her the United States is over. All U.S. assets are going to be siphoned to foreign bank accounts and primarily put into China. China's the next superpower. The U.S. needs to have a series of events. This is prior to 9/11, a series of events that will be the forward-facing excuse as to how the United States became bankrupt in just a couple decades. So to me, that's what I think we're in for in 2024. So I'm not an alarmist or a prepper, but I'm also not an idiot. Like if you want clean water, get some kind of water filtration system. If you have thought anything about non-perishable foods, get some now. Maybe pull some cash out. I don't know. Get to know your neighbors. Get a few chickens while you still can. By the way, the Davos group, the whole UN Sustainable Development Goals, part of their 2024 goals are you're not allowed to have cows, chickens, or goats in your own private ranch or whatever, on your own private farm. Why? Yeah. Oh, climate change, definitely.
Climate change. East Tennessee broke its all-time record low yesterday or the day before.
I'm feeling it.
the
There's snow
lowest
right outside
recorded
this door.
temperature in East Tennessee. Where are you in Tennessee? I'm sorry, it was West Tennessee.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just south of Nashville, so I'm 40
Oh,
minutes south of Nashville, but it's solid snow, and we're about to get more snow today. So it's been pretty cold. I remember on that video of yours that you made that I kind of covered, you were also talking about the cold spell reaching down into across the entire United States.
yeah, they're blaming the polar vortex, they call it now, which is simply an explanation on when the jet stream breaks down. It's zonal typically, meaning it goes from west to east across the US. When it breaks down, it starts to get wavy. It's
Hmm.
called a meridional flow. This has been known in climatology, since the 60s when it was named. And in the late 60s and early 70s, they blamed the breakdown of the jet stream on the impending ice age. Remember the Leonard Nimoy documentary?
Yeah,
And so now they're using the same exact thing and blaming it on global warming, the opposite. So it's so obvious the propaganda the media uses, and they don't care. They lie directly to you. This is what it was 30 years ago, and now it's the exact opposite right now.
totally. And for those who might be scared that there are too many, I mean, like, I don't want to be rude and call them idiots, but like those who just will not research, they're not interested in investigating anything. They're interested in where they feel the safest, which is always with the herd. I feel like a lot of people are worried because not enough people are waking up. I actually kind of feel the opposite. I feel that the more obvious this is getting to us, the more obvious it's getting to the critical mass. Like, I don't know if your listeners understand that the Revolutionary War had less than 4% of the US population involved in it. Less than 4% was the critical mass that did the job. Now, whether that's just mythology and even that was kind of like orchestrated, it still does paint the right picture. The picture is that we don't need 100% of people to wake up. We need the right people to wake up in the right ways and be able to make their art or get their voice out unedited, uncensored to the people, because all the rest of the people are just going to follow the herd. So if tomorrow all of a sudden the deep state crumbles, what are all those followers going to do? Are they still going to follow the deep state? No, they're just going to be like, well, who do we take orders from now? You guys? Okay, cool.
Well, we
So
learned
there
in
is hope.
2011 with the March Against Monsanto, and we had discussed this with think tanks, that all we needed was 2 to 2.5% of the population to be informed on what genetically modified organisms were, and that would be a tipping point. And we projected within 5 years after that 2.5%, you could ask anyone in the modern world if they knew what a genetically modified organism was, and the majority would know.
Yeah.
And so you just need a small, just like you said, 2% of the population you have to inform on a subject. In this case, everybody's corrupt and fake news,
Yeah.
and people are waking up to just those things that we're just not at the tipping point yet.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean,
And
Alex Jones is back on X.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And honestly, like, Alex Jones is an interesting litmus test, because the fact that he is not that fringe anymore. He's not as fringe as he was in the past. And I say that because he himself may still be considered by most people fringe, but the people that listen to him are as mainstream as you can get. The people that are also backing him and saying, like, let him back on X, let him say whatever he wants. Like, it's a litmus test to show you that people are waking up, but what we need is to feel connected to the community who are also waking up. Otherwise, we feel alone. And that makes us feel kind of like, I feel sane in an insane world, which makes me feel endlessly alone. And I know a lot of people that feel this way. Actually, my wife was just on a plane, and she was sitting next to this it was a guy that's been in rehab, and he had a terrible drug addiction, and she started talking to him and was just like, hey, like, so what got you into it? Was it something in early childhood? And he was like, yeah, I mean, I was molested, I was abused, I was traumatized, and I used the drugs to run away. But lately I've been using the drugs, and it's just been putting me in that space. And I've actually liked it because it's caused for me to see things in my trauma that I haven't seen before. And she was like, have you tried meditation? And he was like, yeah, I did, but I stopped because the very second time that I tried meditating, I felt all these entities around me. Like I had like these entities with hooks in me. And I just got really scared by it. And I started talking to my friends and they were like, you're crazy. And she was like, well, I don't think you're crazy. And my mom does this kind of work. Like, I don't think you're crazy. And he sat there and it took him a while. And he was just like, I've never felt heard before. Imagine that. Like, yeah, this guy's a drug addict, admittedly, but he had this like spiritual awakening on meditation that he's got these entities hooked in him. And he was like, I've never felt heard before because I talked to my friends and they just all think I'm crazy. And that shows you that, like, if you don't surround yourself by people who can see you and see your depth for who you are, you can feel so alone that all the intuition you have, all the spirituality that you have, it may not be able to truly ground itself here unless you have support. And I think what's happening now, the reason why I'm actually excited that I'm seeing all this craziness happen and all these mad dashes to repeal all of our freedom is because it seems like such a desperate attempt because there is such a massive awakening happening. And
Yeah.
the more there is an awakening inside people, the more that people like my wife are going to meet other people who are awakening that don't get it. Like, what the hell is happening to me? And somebody sees you finally. It's like, no, you're not crazy. You're in a crazy world and you're trying to adjust as best as you can. So that's what I would say to your listeners is like, if you know people who are really struggling, ask them some questions. See if they're not just having some kind of real awakening. I sense a lot of people are going through really difficult times right now, and they're worried about the state of the world. Don't stop worrying about where your money is going to come from, your food's going to come from. Don't stop worrying about that, but connect with people who care and who can see you, because you'll realize that there is something massive happening in our favor. It's just not going to be televised, as all revolutions aren't.
Exactly. And if the ship is sinking, you don't have to go down with it. You can always swim to shore. The general population is traumatized. I really think that on purpose. The media and the globalists have put people, humanity, through this trauma. Like, it was very revealing to me with the whole COVID nightmare, watching people in the parking lot, like wiping off their groceries in Tyvek suits, just the insanity that
Yeah.
there's a huge portion of the population that's, first of all, was already mentally ill. And then after these 3 years, it's exponential.
Hmm.
Suicides are up. And then the fact that, man, the gaslighting has been so high with the media. The general population doesn't understand how many dead people there are from that thing.
Yeah.
That is, I mean, it's insane. But people like you and I can easily look into it and be flabbergasted. But because we know the whole system is rigged, it doesn't affect me in any way. Knowing that information, I just go
Right.
about my day.
Yeah. Have you heard? So I've been working with Aubrey Marcus lately, and we just launched a film called Unsafe and Ineffective.
Oh, I shared that. I'll share it again with my group.
We're going to do an official launch here soon because I added 2 more parts to it. Um, and honestly, I think it's going to be the beginning of a series because I really focus on this Wizard of Oz theme in it, which is like the wizard would have you believe that average people around the country were demanding that we mandate vaccines and demanding that we mandate lockdown and quarantine and demanding that it's in the worst workforce and in schools. And it turns out that the major pharma companies were funding NGOs to make it look like there was a grassroots demand for all this stuff. And so part of it is just like, it takes a multi-billion or trillion-dollar media um, complex in order to get people to believe certain things, but it really takes a true wizard to make you believe that it was your own idea and your fellow brothers and sisters' idea. Like, yeah, I do want this. So I don't want to keep going on this film, but it's interesting that one of the first times I was on Tim Pool's podcast, actually the very first time I talked about the fourth turning. And a lot of people kind of poo-poo that as just like, yeah, everyone thinks there's the economic cycles that you can perfectly map. But it is pretty interesting that if you go back 80 to 90 years, you're in World War II and the Great Depression, which is a crisis period. 80, 90 years before that, you're in Civil War territory. 80, 90 years before that, you're in the Revolutionary War. And you go 80, 90 years before that is the Glorious Revolution over in Europe. So there are these kinds of cycles, and we're in the middle of it right now. It goes up until 2028. So if you read that book, The Fourth Turning, they really do kind of lay out what this archetypal pattern looks like. And they predicted, it came out in 97. I think it was published in 97. They said in around 2005, give or take 3 years, there's going to be an inciting incident. It'll probably be economic, and then it'll start leading to bigger and bigger incidents until we're full blown in a war, whether you know you're in war or not. And the one thing that marks every single one of these fourth turnings is the most powerful weapons of war are used. So back to the Revolutionary War, what was it? Muskets. There may have been, like more than that. Cannons. You go to the Civil War, were Gatling guns there?
Yeah, we started to get some pretty fancy bullets, things that shot lots of bullets real quick.
So high rapid fire, and then all the way to World War II. What do you have? You have the atom bomb. Now people who have read that book, they're like, well, what is it? Is it an even bigger bomb, something that just explodes the entire planet? And I'm like, it's definitely phones, the internet, the thing. There's a combination of it, but we can't see the weapon because it's not a singular thing that drops out of the sky. It's an infrastructure that has invisible micromillimeter waves that communicate with one another. The weapon is already being waged, and the war isn't between countries anymore.
No,
it's globalists against everybody else.
If they were looking for population reduction and for compliance, an EMP is simple. You don't have to kill a single person. Right. You just have to shut the power off, and then everyone dies naturally within a year. The majority of the population would just perish because we have lost in the agrarian society we were just back in 1900. 90% of all fruits and vegetables came from your yard. And now it's less than 1%. And so that means 99% of the population is at risk of starving if we go back to the Stone Age. They just have no idea how to wild harvest, wild edibles, how to grow food, how to kill an animal, let alone butcher it, cook it, eat it, preserve it, whatever, because we're not going to have a refrigerator.
Nope.
Yeah.
No, and the general knowledge is lost unless you have books. And books alone, I mean, like, good luck.
It only goes so far.
in the middle of the winter, let's say right now, our power went out. I know what I would do because I've prepared for this moment. But all of my neighbors, I've also had to prepare for the fact that if I'm completely fine, I got my generator, I got my jerry cans of gas, I have my fruit trees, I have my garden. Who's going to be the sweetest spot on the block for the neighbors to come with their hands out? And so I've thought of that, and I've thought, like, well, get to know my neighbors, for one, so I have. And for two, community is one of the most powerful resources. And it's actually throughout every crisis period of humanity, I would say community without fail is likely, if you had to point to just one thing that would help people get through, it's community.
Amen. So we live on a dead end road. A number of people on this dead end road have moved here from around the world because of our channel. And the people that live on the road know of the channel, and those that support the things I say, we are all friends, and everyone out in the wilderness area like this has a skill. Most people have heavy equipment. We have so much infrastructure on this road that's dead end. We could shut the road down and let no one in. We're in a steep valley with 1,400-foot cliffs on one side and 800-foot cliffs on the other. So it's almost impossible to even get in here. Not only that, it snows. It can snow 7 feet in a day here. And people they know how to sit inside without ever going outside for days or weeks because it happens. 5 years ago, it rained 3 inches in an hour, and 2 sections of the cliff There was landslides and they cut the road off. 2 days later, the township came down the road and stopped at everyone's house, and they pulled up my drive and they're like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, why?" They're like, "Oh, well, you were cut off for 2 days." We didn't know because we didn't leave. But so there is community. You can build community. The problem is the majority of people live in suburbs or cities,
Yeah.
and those are going to be nightmares in a situation like that.
Yeah, and, honestly, it's not pretty to talk about, but even military projections, and this has been around for decades, military projections, if, like, in the dead of winter or the height of summer, a a grid failure across the country happens, half the population will be dead within the week. Half. And
And
that
that's
might
from,
even be conservative.
I think it's most of them are from dysentery.
Yeah.
People just don't know how to be clean.
And shock as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
People,
Yeah.
when they're in shock and there's high stress, if you have any comorbidity or if there's any chance of you dying for any reason whatsoever, stress will amplify that. And most people will be in a state of stress for, I would say, two main reasons. One, because they haven't prepared their external world. And two, because they have not prepared their internal world. And they're not ready to handle the internal stress, and therefore the external stress will just become too heavy for them. And it's sad to say, but I mean, look at Bangladesh. Look at places in Latin America. Bangladesh has millions of people on the coastline where they just demolished their pristine mangrove forest, the largest mangrove forest in the world. They demolished it. For what? So they could import a bunch of people into Bangladesh to then shrimp harvest for them? No, to send it to the West so the West could have cheap um, seafood, basically, and shrimp. So if you think about that, should there be some kind of supply chain shortage or disruption? A lot of people in Bangladesh are going to die. A lot of people in Latin America and even in some of the places in Europe where, yeah, people have farms and things along that line, but how many people live up in the Alps, that are now, they say they're rugged, they say they're outdoorsy, but they need access to the stores. They need access to things in order to keep them alive. Millions of people in locations that if you needed to feed them from your local location, you couldn't feed millions of people. And if you had to do it overnight, you could not do that overnight. So we're not set up for what I believe is coming. And it doesn't matter what the excuse is, like, war, or like something happens with another pipeline and we don't get enough oil, or whatever it might be, whatever the excuse is. I do believe there will be an excuse. And I do think that it'll probably be a cyber attack. And then that will be used as the next impetus to usher in the next Patriot Act, but like a cyber Patriot Act.
Super Patriot Act. And we know how trustworthy the FBI and the CIA are. So it would be the easiest thing to fake a cyber attack from Russia or China.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then all you have to do is create the cyber Patriot Act where you say, listen, it's too dangerous to have anonymity online.
Everything Nikki Haley wants comes true, right? You have to put in your bloods. You got to, it's your barcode. Everything has to be with a person's name, address, and their CBDCs and their social credit score. It all has to be there because it has to be transparent. So everyone has to know what everyone's doing. It's like we just came full circle. There is going to be a future crime group, right? Arresting you for something that you're going to do in 3 years.
Well, Whitney Webb reported on it. There's already a company called Deep.
Yeah.
And they're already doing stuff like this. And they're using machine learning, not only just to read people's faces, to see what neurons are lighting up inside them. But what was this one that I just saw? Like, I don't want to speak too amateurish on this, but interpreting children's dreams using machine learning to see what their unconscious or subconscious content is. We're in a brand new world with this stuff. And honestly, I will say this. You know how for COVID and the one size fits all solution that was given to 5.55 billion people out there, there are ingredients in that you'll never find out about because they call it proprietary ingredients. Like it's our special sauce. We can't give you our special ingredients. What could that be? Is it there to really help? Or is it there for some kind of other agenda? Because to me, I'm really looking into gene therapies, gene editing. If you look at Moderna, they use this company called National Resilience to spin up at scale the amount of things that they needed. And what is their main thing? Nucleic acids and gene therapies. So altering your genetics little by little so your neurons and your body can express different genetic codes. So there's one in particular, and I won't rant on this too long, but optogenetics. Optogenetics. In 2007, MIT researchers successfully caused for a mouse's brain to express a genetic code of an opsin gene. It's called rhodopsin gene. And it is when you shine blue light on a rhodopsin gene, it triggers the opening of an ion channel, meaning it activates the neuron. And with machine learning, they can selectively find certain neuronal groups. So if you use an electrode, you activate all of a certain kind of neuron. With selective optogenetics, you can use blue light to turn on only the neurons that you want. And then with yellow light, turn it off, which is interesting. Blue and yellow, the Ukrainian flag. I digress. So with optogenetics, what's interesting about that is all you have to do is somehow get this gene, this rhodopsin gene, past the blood-brain barrier. Now, we don't know that this is happening with humans at all, but let's just fancy the idea that maybe there are these proprietary ingredients inside the 5.5 billion things that people got shot up with. If you can get humans' brains to express these genes, then all you would need to do is somehow get blue light and yellow light inside the cranium, which isn't the easiest thing to do. However, what I've been looking at are all these intranasal ways of getting things past the blood-brain barrier, plus exactly where most people hold their phones. I don't know if this is real or not, so I am going out on a limb here. But when you hold your phone, blue and yellow light, even with all the LED lights around you, because you can't get these other lights, the incandescent lights anymore, all the LED lights, all you need is a fraction of a second of blue light or yellow light to get into your brain to activate certain neurons. It's not there yet where we can be remote controlled, but let me tell you what happened to the mouse in 2007. They activated neurons on the left or on the right side. Maybe it was on the left side. I can't remember.
But he walked in a circle.
Yeah, and the rat would just run in circles only when the blue light was on. They would turn the blue light off, and then they would just resume, the mouse just resumed its natural behavior. We're not there yet to where you can make a human do something like go out, that I know of, go out and do something illegal so you can blame an illegal act on them and say, like another John Lennon or a JFK incident. I don't know if we're there yet, but what I am saying is I do believe that our genetics are being, over time, and especially because of the past 3 years, turned into a telecommunications infrastructure that eventually, when there are enough Wi-Fi routers, 5G masts, and cell phones in our hands, it doesn't matter whether you put your phone down. You're in a smart city, you're inside a device, and you operate like a device. So I've been reporting on this for a while on my exclusive content at benjosephstewart.com. To me, I think there's a much deeper play happening, and it's not the pharma companies. I think it's the telecommunications companies that we really need to be looking deeper at. Their new technology, when they talk about their new technology, be aware that they're also talking about you as part of the infrastructure to operate that technology.
Yep, you're the product. We've just come full circle. Now, the beauty is that we live in a valley with no EMF, no cell service, nothing. And which is hard to live in a modern world when you have that. When you need to use certain banking applications, you have to have cell service or it doesn't, like, you can't verify. And when you try to talk to people, you're like, oh, we don't have cell phone down here. It's a landline. They're like, no, that's not true. One company even told us to call our cell company and tell them to put up a tower. I'm like, there's a reason we don't want cell signal down here.
Yeah, yeah. I wonder how long before there's some uh, funded non-governmental organization that moves into town and presents itself as the local community to say, "Where's our 5G towers?" Because that seems to be the play. You give the illusion of public demand and public, because that works with the free and open market system that we think we have, is if
Yeah,
the people demand it, give the people what they want. Well, was it really the people, or was it, an NGO funded by major telecommunications companies to make sure that you can't run away from it? And now, with all the Starlink and satellites up there, it's getting harder and harder. Maybe you could be in the middle of the ocean and still be accessible with some of the
absolutely.
satellites.
All right,
So,
let's finish this up. We're running
yeah.
about an hour now with my final question, which we really need a whole nother hour for. Why are billionaires making bunkers?
Yeah, I think it's just a passing fad. I don't think we should look into it at all.
Are you
You
being
know,
funny?
I am being funny.
Okay.
So building billionaire bunkers has been happening for quite a few years. It's being talked about more now, A, because it's hitting a fever pitch. Probably because billionaires are tipped off on like, that event that we've been telling you about. Yeah, we're moving up the timeline on it. So if you have any construction you need to do it now. And so, yeah, we have Bezos in, what was it, New Mexico, I think. We have Mark Zuckerberg in Maui. We have Peter Thiel and Sam Altman going together in on, Peter Thiel's thing out in New Zealand. And these are all the billionaires that are the rock stars that you hear about. What about all the people in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, who have the most amount of billionaires out of any other state? And they're all building bunkers. Are we in for, do we have the technology to create earthquakes? Do
No.
do we have the technology to produce a blackout
Oh,
across
yeah.
the country? Yeah. Do we have the
Well, the bunkers
technology?
are simply for that short period of time when the population is starving to death and they just hide out for a year
Yeah.
so that no one comes and gets them. That's it.
Yeah.
It's not for a nuclear war, in my opinion. It could be for a solar flare, but like a Carrington type event is just going to be the same as the EMP. It's a
Yeah.
blackout. And so you just need to go to your billionaire hotel room for a year, let all
Right.
the peons die, and then we can figure out, we'll all come back to Davos and figure out what to do.
Yeah. So I mean, to me, that would be the explanation. And the thing is like, there are so many people that are so afraid of entertaining the idea of anything that sounds like a conspiracy theory. And I'll go back to one of the first things that I said. Maybe I said it before when we were talking, but I take a Socratic approach to everything. Believe everything and nothing. It doesn't behoove me to be like, well, I really feel like the world is like this, so I'm just going to fully believe it and cut my mind off to all these other possibilities. No, take a look at, I could be wrong about all of it. I'll use my intuition, but why could they be building underground bunkers? I'm going to not only assume the worst, but I'll assume other things as well. I'll take a look at 3 or 4 different options. None of them look good. None of them look good. So to me, at least for the audience's sake, when I take a look at this stuff, I try to inspire people and empower people. When I watched Zeitgeist all those years ago, it didn't scare the shit out of me and make me hide my head in the sand. It made me think, whoa, this actually seems very real. But now I feel like I have a place. I know what my voice is meant to be used for. I have to use my voice to talk about these things. So if any listener is feeling a little bit scared or worried, like I'm not prepared enough, there is no time like the present. Just start now. If you haven't started before, start now. I don't know exactly what that should look like, but just imagine what the grid shutting down for a week or 2 weeks or a month would do to you. If you didn't have access to internet or power, if you didn't have access to food or clean water, what would you do? Start now. And the chances are that, I wouldn't say some terrible things are coming, but I would say if some terrible things are coming, whatever you do to prepare now may not only help you, but it may be something that you can help your neighbor with, who can help you with something that you don't have. So remember community. So why are they building all these bunkers? Because they're a very, very, very small cohort of the population. And they know that when the shit hits the fan, and they're probably clued off to the fact that it's about to hit the fan, that they're not going to be very popular amongst the people. So, like, does everybody need an underground bunker? Maybe not.
No.
But, get prepared for if it's exceedingly cold out or if it's exceedingly hot out. What are you going to do if there's no power? Just ask yourself these questions. And this isn't to scare anyone. It's to show you that, prior to World War II, would you have wanted to dig your head in the sand or hear some of the scary theories of what was about to unfold? I think you probably want to hear what was about to unfold and empower yourself. And remember that, like, you're told that you're 1 in 8 billion people and you're insignificant. You're not. You have to be told that to be disempowered enough to go along with, I need the daddy and the mommy nanny state to take care of me. So that's all I'll say. You are powerful. We are powerful. And do not be afraid to use your voice.
Yeah, we say don't be scared, be prepared, because
go.
there's nothing like peace of mind. And if you're the most prepared guy in your community, you're going to be the leader when the shit hits the fan. And then you're 1 in a billion. You become the most important guy in the room because you know how to grow food, you know how to organize these people, security, etc. And you can give them hope. Most people won't have hope. But if you're like, dude, we got this, I know how to do it all. And then you can delegate. And this guy's growing crops. Also, you know about the World War, grow a victory garden. If you've never grown food before and you've got, even if you don't have land, get a bucket and fill it with dirt and learn how to fail at growing food because it could save your ass in the future.
Yeah. I'll just say one more thing. In Germany in World War II, I think it was when Dresden was being bombed into oblivion, the psych wards let out all the people who were previously in a psych ward because they were mentally unstable, insane, if you want to put it that way. They were all let out once the war started or once the bombing started. Not because they were just like, well, it would be inhumane to just leave you in here, but because they were saying, listen, I need to get out there and help people. And they were certifiably not mentally unstable anymore because they had purpose. Something about the lack of purpose in this society makes you feel, what do I want to do? Make art, this, that, and the other. This world doesn't feel right. And then it could lead you to doing drugs. And then eventually you're in a psych ward, not because of you, but because of society. And then all of a sudden, the world goes crazy and it snaps these crazy people back into sanity where they're like, we are now servants. We're going to go out and serve our community. So remember that if this world seems crazy to you, all it really takes is for the world to call upon your gifts for you to realize I am important. I have learned how to grow food and none of my neighbors have. So you may feel like, oh man, what are we going to do? This whole world sucks. And then all of a sudden the world calls upon your greatest gifts and that you thought were just things that you picked up along the way. And now you are a leader in your community. Do not be afraid of things that are to come. Be prepared. And then remember that everything that you have learned, pass it on to the children and to the other people in your community. It will not only be a lifesaver, but it will be fulfilling to the deepest part of your soul.
Wow, that was beautifully put. And it's been a pleasure, Ben Joseph Stewart, having you on the show. Go check out, where am I here? Let me click the button. Check out Ben's website. That's the easiest way to access everything, benjosephstewart.com. You can also find Ben on X and Instagram. All those links are going to be below. It was a pleasure having you on for the first time. I think we should do another hour on the new documentary coming up where we will have to exclusively put that over on Rumble.
Yeah.
So that we don't get, before we go, I want to let you know that an NGO just came out with the top 96 climate deniers on all the internet, and we made the list.
Congratulations, man. There is no higher honor. You should actually craft yourself a trophy and make a thank you speech for that.
I think we may have a podcast for it. It's been a pleasure having you on, Ben. Be safe.
You too.